When it comes to tech startups or SMEs or just getting a business off the ground in general, access to capital is crucial, especially on the African continent. Olumide Soyombo is one of the well-known active angel investors in Nigeria, tech startups, and Africa at large. Since he began angel investing in 2014, Soyombo has invested in 33 startups, including Stripe-owned Paystack, PiggyVest, Team App, among others. Yesterday, the day before, actually, the investor announced the launch of Voltron Capital, a Pan-African venture capital firm he co-founded with Abe Choi, a US-based entrepreneur and investor. He joins us now to discuss investing in tech startups in Africa. Good morning, Olumide. Thanks for joining us. So Voltron, for those that are older, I don't know if you should remind our younger viewers, if we put it on screen, the cartoon was the defender of the universe. Yes. Yeah. Are you the defender of African startups?
Well, I think our name comes from actually the series, the cartoon series.
Yes.
And if you remember the cartoon, we had the black lion, the blue lion, the red lion with the blazing sword, all coming together to form this defender of the universe. I think what Voltron signifies is the coming together or me bringing together African investors to back super founders out of Africa. So that's coming together of different skill sets and putting money together to then back interesting companies out of Africa.
Great stuff, great stuff. You've been quoted as saying African startups suffer from a severe lack of access to early stage funding. Why is it so severe, considering, and I hope this is not an unfair statement, considering the billionaires we have in the African continent, why is it so severe?
Well, I mean, it's not as severe as it was in 2014 when we started. I remember when we started investing, we copied the Y Combinator model where we'd bring in startups for 3 months and then put them in front of a demo day where the bigger investors would come in. But in 2014, there were no even bigger investors to come in. You had to back those startups, so you had to write a second check even to those companies because probably the billionaires were not investing. But that's changing. We are seeing with the Flutterwaves and Paystacks of this world, they've created some validation, which obviously certain investors look for before coming into a sector or leaving the traditional sectors they know, like real estate and so on. So that validation is then creating this interest in the ecosystem, and that's what I'm also trying to push with Voltron.
Fantastic. You're focusing on Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, and the North Africa region. Why those areas in particular on the continent? Yeah,
I think for us, right, it's the first thing is large markets and ecosystems, right? So we're looking for large markets, large ecosystems where super entrepreneurs can build interesting things, and those areas have those key things. And for me, right, I have an enterprise company called Bluechip Technologies that is also in some of these markets. So it's about giving me access to those markets, and then at the end of the day, it will be about partnerships once we even go into those markets. But the reason why we're there is large markets and large ecosystems.
Okay, so say there's a treasure chest of a startup in Namibia is a small country, but you just talked about large markets. But say there's a tech startup, value tech startup nobody's heard of in Namibia. How do we unearth value in those other markets? Yeah.
It takes a village, right? I remember even in 2014 when we started investing, the ecosystem was just in its infancy. So people like Bosun Tijani had created CC Hub, where they had started putting the building blocks for innovation, bringing talents into a cluster. So the locals also have to do those things in those markets, right? So the locals in Namibia need to create that buzz around their market, need to bring those building blocks together. So when they create the beat, we'll come and dance.
Then you will come in. Okay, so you've invested in a lot of startups. Yeah. Is it fair to say that the Africa tech scene has been dominated by payment services and particularly fintechs? And is that as a result of Africa's financial inclusion needs?
I would say yes and no. Yes, from the point of view of some of these entrepreneurs have seen some of the friction in those markets, and then they decided to go for it. Yes, my portfolio is heavy leaning on fintech, but it's been more coincidental than deliberate. In the early stage funding of startups, I tend to focus more on the founder. So if a founder I like is building something in the fintech space, obviously I'm going to back that founder. So if people like Odon of PiggyVest or Somto and Josh of PiggyVest are building something in the ed tech or health tech startup, I will still back those companies because in the early stage it's more founder-led. So these founders have seen a problem most times in the financial services area, and then they've chosen to go and tackle that problem, and that's what's driven investability of those industries. So founders or super founders drive investability of industries.
Oh, so we have founders and super founders. Okay, good stuff. The fintech space made a lot of headlines here in Nigeria, the Flutter Waves, the Paystacks, and so on. Are they on a collision course with the banking sector, or is there, because there's the whole narrative of the upstarts and the establishment, and so, or is there room for collaboration between the two?
I think it's collaboration and collision. But you find out that what are the fintechs really doing? The fintechs are taking some things the banks have done and taking a specific area and then unbundled it and try to do it better. So, for example, you see Carbon taking lending, unbundled it from what the banks typically do and try and push it out to more people, create convenience, or even Piggyvest when they first started out with savings, right? Savings is a key function of the bank. Taking out that sole function of a bank, try and create it, make it more fun, create it for millennials. So fintechs have started to do that. But you find out that today, maybe fintechs are trying to be like banks and banks are trying to be like fintechs. And I don't think they're on any collision course. In fact, there's more collaboration than people actually know of. Most of the fintechs you see today are being powered by some of the innovative banks. So there's more collaboration than collision that we see, that people tend to see.
Good stuff. In an earlier segment, earlier with our RI's business analyst, Chikambo, we're talking about the education sector and the challenges, Africa's infrastructure challenges, does that impede the advancement of the tech sector from your vantage point? How do you see it?
Yeah, I think there are things you can't, and I like this saying that you can't out-entrepreneur your way out of certain things or out of some bad government policies and so on. So yes, infrastructure does impede the growth of innovation. How do you build without power? Or how does an e-commerce player get its goods to a remote area without
logistics,
or road on a network of roads, right? You can't you're not going to build roads everywhere as an entrepreneur. So you find out that infrastructure deficit does impede innovation, but in some cases it creates the opportunity for people to innovate. Like you find Zipline trying to deliver with drones because of bad road network in remote areas to deliver medicine and blood. So you find those kind of innovation coming out of the infrastructure deficit, but obviously generally you find out that infrastructure deficit does impede the growth and innovation that startups have in different regions.
All right, so those startups in different regions, they need more Olumide Soyombos in order to get them off the ground. How do we multiply what you're doing?
I think that's really what I'm trying to do. You find out that the traditional Nigerian HNI, like I said, would typically invest in other asset classes apart from tech, and we need people to take a bet on the companies here. So you find out that the evangelism is what I'm on a mission to do, right? Preaching the startup gospel so to people, right? Saying you need to pay attention to this space. And I think the job has been made easier now with the Paystack exit, Flutter Waves, 1 billion. So I now get calls from people saying, hey, Olumide, next time you're investing, please, I have my 15K, I have my 20K, I want to get carried along.
In dollars, just
in dollars. Oh, sorry, in dollars.
Just so people know.
Yes, right. In dollars. I want to invest in startups because they've seen there's a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out in the market today. So I think us talking to these people, investor education, basically generally is what will get more Olumide Soyombos into the ring, and that can be only good for our startups.
Olumide Soyombo, co-founder Voltron Capital and Bluechip Technology Limited. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about the tech sector. Appreciate it.